How's everybody doing out there? So good to be here on Sunday at Mike's, doing it live, 11 p.m. Central European time, like we do. And no different tonight. We're all good to be here, all glad to be here. Let me make some adjustments here, get things all said. So many people in the live stream already. Hey guys, good to see each and every one of you. I'll address your replies here in a moment, but let me start out by saying that, as usual, time is a precious thing. And for you to spend a little bit of yours here with me, joining in on this live stream, either live, like my wonderful crew here is tonight, or watching it later on in the rerun, I want to let you know that that time you spent is always going to be great. They appreciate it. So thank you very much, guys. Well, had a little bit of success with a few things I did. I put out the video talking about a short history of the fat strat here recently, and got a lot of interest, and the video is doing very well. So I'm very happy, and that's happening. And I want to thank everybody who wrote in the comment section of that one. I appreciate that very much. It was good to hear from you. But it was during the filming of that I was doing the research into the history of the double fat strat to make that presentation. Um, I started to really realize something again that I think I've hit on before, and I want to talk about that tonight. But let me catch up here in the chat because it is flying tonight. Good to see everybody here up at the top. Yesterday, I sold my beloved E3 Cat's Music Journey. Says, welcome, Cat's Music Journey. And as I was looking at the guitars on my wall, I asked myself that very question. What if I sold all of them? Which one would I keep? Funny you should ask. Well, I'm so glad that you responded to the chat question tonight. If you could only keep one guitar, what would it be? Tricky question, Scott says. I have to keep the one I use 9% of my videos, but I have to keep my dad's okay too. Yeah. See, tonight really isn't about having, the desert. It's not really the desert island guitar question per se. Um, what I'm really talking about tonight is not so much about owning one guitar. It's about the guitar you really live on as a player. The guitar you really live on as a player. Because as I said, when I was doing my research for the double fat strat, on the double fat strat, I realized something again, that these guys, these were their guitars. There wasn't, they had other guitars, I'm sure. But when it came down to it, these were the guitars that they played all the time, live on stage and in the recording studios. Again, they had other guitars in their collection, I'm sure. But these players, the ones that I pointed out, and I'm going to point out a few more tonight, who are really identified by that guitar, by their guitar. Um, and when and that is based on a couple of things. One of the main things about being identified as a musician with a particular guitar is the sound of that guitar and the image that that guitar produces with you on a stage setting. A lot of most iconic moments are featuring Bruce Springsteen, for example, on his broadcaster. Now, I'm going to start out with Bruce Springsteen because here we have a guy who, when you think about him and you think about Bruce Springsteen, you think about him with that broadcaster. Looks like a Telecaster, but it's actually a broadcaster. And that has been his guitar that he's played more or less for since 75, maybe before that, long time. And that's his go-to. That's the one that he writes on. That's the one he gigs on. That's the one he takes in the recording studio. So that's kind of what I'm talking about tonight, just to set this up. Let me catch up again here in the chat. I can answer with impunity, Red says. I will only, by the way, Cat's Music Journey, that that 5E3 is the Tweed, the Fender Tweed, right? Nice amp. Um, I can answer with impunity. Will says, if I only got to keep one guitar, it would be my beater acoustic. Yeah, do most of my writing using it. So yeah, electrics could go if needed. Yeah, that's a great point too. Because of course, I mean, but that kind of goes into the desert island thing because then you'd say, well, if I brought my electric, where would I plug it into? And then I would need a desert island amp, and I would need a desert island that had electricity. And a couple of coconuts strung together is not going to make it. So there is that, but I'm just talking about the one, just a daily, every day, the one that you gravitate towards, or the one that you're packing away in the back of your car to go to a gig with. So that kind of thing. Anything else? Scott's here. Hey, Scott, how you doing? If I haven't said hello so far, sir, to you. Um, Problem is, if I could only keep one, I keep my dad's old guitar. Yeah, yeah, I can dig that. Yeah, because it's a sentimental thing. Yeah, it's a tough call. Everybody's saying. That's why I work with a dog to keep all the things I have and never be forced to choose. I can't sell a trade in my guitars. Yeah, again, uh, we're talking about a time that existed that I'm trying to think about. I'm trying to remember, growing up, really getting into music in the 80s, early 80s, about guitar collections. I knew some older musicians, even when I was starting out, and almost every man to a letter really only had one guitar. I remember my high school friend Drake Gooseby. He had his one guitar. It was a white Les Paul copy, probably a Court. Um, and that was the one that he always took around. It was something that was born out of poverty, necessity, not the ability to have multiple ones. But then I think about the older musicians that I met and studio guys, and they had collections of guitars, but at the end of the day, I only always saw them with the same guitar. And it was a different one, but it depended upon the player. But that's just the truth of the matter. It wasn't until, I guess, the internet age really magnified it, I guess is a good word to use. The collections that people have, because people began to say, hey, I need content, and oh, I got this room full of guitars, let me show that. And so that might have magnified that kind of collection for a lot of cats. But really, with the major players, at least the guys that I followed, they weren't studio musicians, they were performing musicians as well. They always were really identified with one particular instrument. So I want to talk about that tonight. Will says, my buddy Adam at Rev Guitars channel is sending me a new Fender Red Redondo acoustic electric. Nice. Should be in a few days. Hopefully, I can get myself set up, adjusted in order to start posting my originals. Yeah, man, that sounds nice. That's a nice gift. Really need a different info. Yeah, okay. There's a saying, fear the man who only owns one gun. Yeah, thank you, Scott. Excellent quote to jump this off of with, because that is the thought exactly. The lone gun thing. He's only got one gun, and you know, being a master of that, as you put it, as opposed to being diluted by choice. Scott says, and he's correct. That's the sentiment here, because we're going to get into that. Believe me, because I have really realized, having had a guitar collection and then one day looking around saying, what the hell am I doing? this is this is not me. This is not how, how I roll. And finally coming to the conclusion of putting something together that really answered my personal needs. Think about Brian May. His guitar, the Red Special, is just as famous as he is. You know, it wasn't a factory guitar. It's a lot of mystery regarding to how he and his father made it. But seeing that he has a PhD in physics, I don't doubt that he did. Um, but that guitar, because of the way it was built, the wood that was used, the way they made the pickups, that was the sound of Queen. Now, is that a sound particularly that I like to hear all the time that works all the time? No, no, it does not. I find it very shrill sometimes, to be honest with you, but on certain songs, certain stuff, sounds great. But again, you know, and when you layered it and you harmonized it, then it did something really special. Um, but that was the same guitar that was played for decades. And the technique that Brian May developed on that guitar was over days and weeks and months and years of practice, decades of practice on that guitar, on that instrument. He knew it inside and out. Same thing with Eddie Van Halen. His early sound is inseparable from the original striped guitar and amp that he used. Billy Corgan was recently talking about, he was in 5150 studio looking at the amp and the guitar that he had been trying to, duplicate the sound of, when in his youth. And, he just had to laugh, because um, I guess he realized that's Eddie's thing, you know, that's and he came up with that through years of trial and error. When he later changed his rigs and guitars, something really interesting happened. Fans started saying he doesn't sound like Eddie anymore. Even though it's Eddie Van Halen playing, and you always say, "Well, it's not the guitar; it's the player." Well, the instrument that he used to use became part of his voice. It's like if Mariah Carey came out and she started singing like Taylor Swift. You'd say, wait a minute. And you see the same thing with other players as well. Prince had several guitars over his career, but audiences really specifically associated him with his Mad Cat. And so there's that. Catch up here in the chat. Eddie and his parts caster, yeah. Willie and that beat up acoustic he keeps banding back together. Yeah, Trigger. Trigger has been played for 70 years now. 70 years that man has been playing that acoustic guitar, that poor thing. Trigger, Trigger needs to be put out to pasture. but that's the one that he records with. That's the one that he gigs with. That's the one. It's like I have a pair of boots that I bought here in Amsterdam. Oh, I'd say over 20 years ago now. And I love those boots so much that when a heel breaks or I get a scuff or something like that, I immediately take it down to the cobbler and have him repair them. Because when I put those on, it's like I just know how they feel. I just know how my foot feels in. It's like an old friend. And it's like that with guitars. It's like that with guitars. Hands down, would I have to keep my blonde Strat? Yeah, blonde Strat, Michael, is nice. I yeah, can't really argue that one. Welcome, by the way, Michael. The coin pick kills makes Brian sound. Yeah, it's that coin, and I have some. I did while when I was living in Singapore, I bought a couple of coin picks and I tried them out. And, I came to the conclusion that, for my style of playing and for my feel, I couldn't do it. It wouldn't work, you know. you're not gonna get funky with it. The kind of funk licks that you need. You're not gonna get that with that kind of pick. Um, exactly my good example. Poor old Trigger. Metallica sounded different the day after they cut their hair. Hey, Kit Kats, how you doing? Yeah, getting back to Van Halen, that really was a major complaint. And I too, you can go on YouTube and watch Van Halen videos before he passed away and listen to his rig and his guitar and everything. And yeah, it wasn't that sound. But guys like Billy Corgan in that same interview that I was reading was making the point that they don't want to sound old. As a musician, you say, well, that makes me sound old. Um, I think that's not the general consensus of most players. Like I said, Prince, he switched up guitars when he felt like it, but he still made sure at least once a night, on a certain track, a certain song, that he brought that, more, that he brought that Mad Cat out, for the most part, if he was, so inclined, he usually was. And so that's kind of the thing. I thought they cut their hair because they got so bad, like a gypsy guilt thing. Sounded different as soon as they released the Black Album, but definitely more so once their hair went. Yeah, it seems like, again, a switch of instruments will do that to you, especially again if you're strongly identified with the sound of those particular instruments, like Slash and his Gibson. When you see Slash playing any other guitar other than a Gibson in his hands, your mind kind of says that looks weird. So just that was talking. That's what I meant about in the introduction. I was talking about that visual aspect of it as well, that sticks in people's mind. And as a performing artist, one of the worst things that you want to do is get stuck in a rut and playing the same character. You want to switch it up, but as a musician, it's much more difficult. Then I get back to Hiram Bullock, who was strongly associated with his two humbucker single coil Strat, and that was his guitar. That was his good. That was a guitar. A lot of guys like me watching a late night show when I was a kid and going into college, um, looked at that guitar and said, "Hey, that's interesting." And if you constantly switch instruments, you'll never develop the same kind of deep connection of these artists that I've talked about before. Now, um, I'm speaking from an artist standpoint. Really, in this case, I'm putting on my artist hat, and I'm saying that my Strat, I s- I told you guys I wasn't playing anymore, but that I'm not, but that's not true at all because I'm at least putting in an hour of practice. Because the other day I got scared because I started getting arthritis here in this area, and my hand hurt for a day. And I said, "Oh my gosh, there's gonna." I started thinking there's gonna come a day when you can't play anymore. When not playing is not really going to be a choice; it's going to be out of necessity. So you better play as much as you can. Plus, I'm learning the ins and outs and quirks of this guitar even as I go. Slight adjustments that I want to have Fern make. Um, Cosmetic changes always in the back of my mind. Things like that. But I've come to the conclusion the sound that is one of the best instruments that I've had, and I can mimic the sound of just about everyone I've got on most of my records. So that works for me. But I'm developing a relationship with it, developing a relationship and getting to know it. It's it's developing an intimacy, like a relationship. It's the working guitar concept. For me, you know, I've changed things with it over time until eventually became a working guitar. That's what it is. And I realized, and I was sitting with Fern at his house having dinner him and his son, and talking about that. And I said, all I really need is a working guitar, a working man's guitar. And there's something very liberating about that kind of thinking, because once you stop worrying about the guitar you should be playing, you actually start focusing on actual playing. Well, I should be playing one of these vintage Japanese guitars, but you know what? No, no. I like my modern guitar because it's got none of the issues that those vintage ones eventually will get. I don't have time for that either. Um, Now, of course, the internet says differently. And this kind of discussion, not surface level, not desert island talk, but really, really talking about bonding and building a relationship with the guitar and artists that did it, and why we identify those artists with a certain guitar. Um, but the internet says the opposite. Scott says, back in the lead belly days, folks could only get one instrument if they were lucky. Then to play and keep it with you through hard times is quite admirable to me. Yes. You know, there's a clip that just came up from Joe Strummer of the Stray Cats. And he was talking about they went to England, they went over from the States to the UK, not a dime in there to their name. And the only thing they had were their instruments. And that was it, you know. And so there's no wonder, Brian is one of my favorite guitarists, now living guitarists of all time. He's in my top three, top five list. It's because of those 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 hours those guys put in even before they stepped in the recording studio. And on instruments that were held together, they weren't top of the line stuff. And Brian still brings that guitar out every now and then. He still uses it. One or two good ones is my theory. Maddie says, "Hey, Maddie, how you doing?" Yeah, yeah. But the internet says different. The internet runs on novelty: new guitars, new pedals, new gear. Hmm. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying new gear, but that doesn't necessarily mean you need all of it to develop your voice as a musician. Constantly getting flooded with all this new gear that's coming in released every week, and you could get hypnotized into thinking that somehow or another going to make a difference, whether your song, your tune, whatever you're working on, your sound is a hit. It's not it's not but the internet says different. Some of the most recognizable guitar sounds in history came from players who stuck with one instrument for decades, is the thesis I'm throwing out here tonight. Core of the thesis I'm putting out tonight. Even so much so in the case of Eddie Van Halen that because he switched guitars and amps and fundamentally changed his sound, that people just didn't dig it. I mean, you know, and it is a sorry thing to say, but at the very least, I think Eddie, being stubborn, you know, could have said, okay, for some of these, like if I do Hot for Teacher, I'm going to bring out the Frankenstrat or a reasonable facsimile thereof, and I'm going to play that. But he said, no, I'm going to play my with these EVH guitars, and damn it, I'm going to promote it, and I'm going to go through this, and and he suffered with his fans as a result of that. It's weird, but again, um, that's one of the curses, I suppose, of sticking with, or being identified with one instrument. However, that was usually the norm, and as a result of the fans' response would show you that people don't care about your guitar collection. They want to hear you playing the one that they identify you with from the song that they like. Cheers to the great guitar crew. Mike says, cheers to you too, sir. I have 6 months to no buy on new gear. Yeah, is that like a self imposed kind of thing there? This Joe Strummer Campfire Acoustic by Fender is a great little guitar, one I regret having to sell. Yeah, if I could play like Lead Belly, I would trade in all my guitars for the one. You'd have to get down to the crossroads and make a deal. Man, he's at an invitation. Oh, I have 6 months no buy on new gear. Interesting. Okay, if that means something from the shop thing, then that's an interesting. Something post personal. Okay, got you. Yeah, yeah, do that to yourself, or say I'm not getting. I'm saving up. Like for example, I'm saving up for Japan right now. So certainly nothing because I want to go to Japan this year. Got to go to Japan this year. So. Everything else is inconsequential to me at this point. But I'd like just to say that because there's something powerful about having that kind of a relationship with your instrument. And saxophone players, you don't walk into a saxophone player house and he takes you down to the basement. He's got like racks of saxophones. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. How many trumpets did Miles Davis have when he passed away? I bet you the answer to that is very relatively few. Guitarists and bassists usually have a tendency to hoard. Um, and I myself, again, have found over the years that once I gravitate towards an instrument, that's the one that I'm always constantly using. Now, in recording songs, recording albums, there's a trick that you do in order to make the sound of your electric guitar sound wider. It's use two different guitars, doubling the same track, and spread them in stereo. You can double that. Some people I know triple that, as well. But using two different guitars in order to get that kind of stereo imaging, and I do it all the time. If you listen to my recordings, it's a trick I do in order to get that big sound. And the key to that is two different guitars, a Tele and a Strat, or a Strat and Les Paul, or some combination like that. I have found that with my current guitar that I'm using, with the pickups that I've used forever, that's another part of it as well because those are the same. Even though guitar has changed over time, the pickups have been the same. Once I got those pickups, those are the ones that I've used for everything. But just really identifying. Let me get off of that. Let me just say that identifying with a particular instrument has been very helpful. And with this one, and getting to know it and working it with my current pedal setup, I found that by using different amps, I can achieve the same effect. To make it sound, even though the same guitar, but put it on, tweak it a little bit differently, use a different amp, and you can get that same effect. That was actually my main concern about, you know, I always, but I'm not doing a recording, so I don't need two guitars. But uh, my main concern about always keeping another electric around was for that purpose. But that spare electric, that one that was just for double tracking, it never ever got played any other time. I've always had two electrics for that reason, especially when I was really recording. Sometimes many, many more. But that was the reason. Now that I don't have that reason in my life currently, there's no need for that. But if I wanted to use that same production trick, I can achieve it with one now with modern technology. So there is that. There is that. Catch up here in the chat. I work in a guitar shop so it can be tough. Yeah, that's like working in a candy shop and being on a diet. Someone's gonna walk in that's gonna be calling your name. We'll see how it goes, Maddie. Be strong, man. Be strong. The Jim Earthsay collection is going up for auction soon as a great collection. I don't think he could play it all. Yeah. Oh, there's an insane collection. Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I'm familiar with that. I saw that is true. It is an insane collection. Changing parts on the guitar brings up the thesis paradox. Is the same? Is it the same guitar if it had all the parts changed? There are great discussions on parts casters on many a forum regarding just that, and that gets into the argument. Well, it's a Fender approved neck, and if I put a new Fender neck on it, it's still a Fender guitar. No, no, it's not. It's become a parts caster. Some people would argue, and some people would argue the other way. And some people would say, well, it started out, I think the only thing that's original from the original guitar that I bought is the knobs. So there's that too. That's funny you should mention that. I was just reading something along those lines. um, so there's that. Um, for a lot of players, guitars aren't just tools. They're tied to periods of your life. They remind you of certain gigs, certain bands, somebody in the family, certain songs you wrote, maybe even certain people that you played music with. And when someone says they can't sell or trade their guitars, I get that. It's not always about the instrument itself, it's about what it represents. So there's that aspect of it too. Um, Usually, even guys with big collections usually end up having one guitar that becomes their musical home base, is what we'll call it. Yeah, actually, I like that. Off the top of my head, that's a good one. We'll call it the musical home base. So you have an instrument that's your musical home base. You may have others, but that's the one that I'm talking about tonight. That's the one I'm speaking of tonight. I tend to get rid of old rigs when bands break up and buy fresh stuff for a new project. It's like breaking up with a girl and getting new sheets. I can dig that. Mick Mars has an excellent collection of guitars too. Yeah, I read Mick Mars is always with, but he's been around, man. I think that he was involved in the original design of the guitar. So yeah, he has a few. He has Emotep's original 335. That's bad. That's mean. But seriously, seriously, um, it's about the way it used to be, and I just reminisce about that. Um, Sometimes I think about that. Um, I really feel that we've lost something when we got into the more show offy stage of being musicians. Um, because when I was growing up, again, I didn't see any examples of collections in any of the cats that I knew, even the guys who had studios, home studios, or maybe moderately sized project studios, not big guitar collections, unless they had stuff at home that they weren't, they didn't bring. But just wasn't a thing. You got your guitar, and that was the one that you dealt with. And, you went down to the Guitar Center, you picked something off the wall, and you make that work. It's weird. And then it turned into something else. So, or maybe it was like that all along. I don't know. You know, not quite too sure. And again, a working guitar can be expensive or it can be cheap. I'm not talking about the price of the guitar either. Phil McKnight was on saying that he hates reviewing expensive guitars because he always gets grief for them, which is funny. But no, it's not that either. It's not about the cost of the guitar. Although I tell you, if bombs start raining down on your head, that's a whole different question too. That's not this question or the desert island question. This is, or what are you grabbing if you have the ability or thought inclination to do so? What would you grab guitar wise? What would be the most important thing? So there's that. Um, it it's not a price thing. It's not a price thing either. Um, Apparently, old Molly Crew rehearsals look like a guitar center. Interesting. Steven, what's up? How you doing, sir? Welcome to the chat. Good to have you here. Will says, too bad Vince could only sing in sports in the studio as opposed to the squawking he does live. Love the albums, but extremely rough to watch live. Yeah, man. I gotta be honest with you. I live Motley Crue um, is not great. The music is tight, but the singing is can be hard, and especially now. But that gets into the argument of a lot of these older guys need to hang it up, and you start to wonder why. Why aren't these guys hanging this up? Why is Vince still out there trying to sing Dr. Feelgood? 40 years later, 30 years later, and sounding like that. And relying on backing tracks and backing singers in order to get through the performance when he should be doing some other things that he apparently is not. So these are a lot of questions. The music industry, man, is smoke and mirrors. And if I'm that age and you're up there and you're doing it, you're either doing it out of love or you really need to do it and you can't, and maybe you should. um What about the people who are only able to attain one guitar, but it's a bad playing guitar? That's gotta suck. You could only sing in spurts. I got you, Red. Yeah, man, that would suck too. I When I would travel through Vietnam and through Cambodia and Laos, um, I would see guys on the side of the road with their guitar, acoustic, 99% of the time, and they made those old Sears K guitars look like, custom shop Gibsons. They were pretty beat up. But I remember this one boy was playing a blue guitar. I mean, it looked like it was painted like a house, not in a car blue, but a house blue. Wooden guitar, acoustic guitar. And boy, he was making that thing sing. No lie. Where was that? That was in the mountains of That was up there in the mountains of Thailand. Oh God, what's that called? Beautiful place. Anyway, but you work with what you got, and then when you get something really nice, then boy, howdy, you got the worst parts out. Johnny Cash was smart. He sang in his own voice, so he never outgrew it. Yeah, Scott, you just triggered my beginnings with guitar. Triggered, trigger. That's the key. That's the code word tonight, guys. Trigger. You know, a lot of those singers. I noticed that Prince at the end. I was watching his piano acoustic piano concert clips, and I noticed that he didn't sing the high parts. He lets the girls in the audience sing the high parts. You know, he brought it. He'll play it in the same key. I'll give him that. He didn't try to change keys on you like Mariah Carey, other people do. But he let the girls sing the high parts because even he couldn't, do that anymore. The voice is Whitney Houston, as we all know, at the end couldn't sing a note. Of course, smoking crack 24/7 didn't help, but still, it was bound to happen anyway. That's why, um, some singers get smart and they start saying, like Rod Stewart, they started saying, "Oh, I'm just going to do standards and make that my shtick now." So, singers have got a window on them. I was checking out a great guitar player from Japan. Tanaka was his name. The article was in the Guardian this week. He is great. Yeah, there's a lot of great guitar players out of Japan. Don't there always has been. It's funny. Everybody's all of a sudden discovering Japan. It's like I've known this place since the mid '90s. That's so funny to see. I'm glad people are getting excited about it. It's going to be very interesting to see because it's been 5 years since I've been there. What's jumping? Prince doesn't get the credit he deserved. He could play all sorts of instruments and was a heck of a composer. Yeah, Will. Prince was one of a kind. He was a modern day Mozart, for sure. He got compensated a little bit better than Mozart, but his end was no better. That's just the truth of it. Just sing like you're dying, then you're sweet. Is that the formula? It's just an amazing thing to me. Like I said, I think back to growing up, and again, you know, everybody had their guitar, everybody had their instrument. Steve Demont didn't have two Black Beauty customs, but he sure did have one. And when he went to school, I think he slept with that guitar because he had it with him in class. You'd see him walking down the hallway. He had it in his case. He carried that guitar, went to music class, played it, put it in its case. He did not let that guitar leave his sight at all when it was out of the house. Taught me a lot about that discipline as well because my friend Drake, he did not have that discipline. He left his Strat in the music room and it got stolen. So interesting thing there, just a note now that I think about it. There's a thought I haven't had for 50 years. Well, not that long, 40. But I think every player eventually does find that instrument or creates it or gets it together. Even people with large collections usually have one guitar they reach for first, is the point of this. And that guitar is again like their tone home, you know, their musical home. And the ones that their hands and their fingers trust. Doesn't feel weird. You pick it up again, it feels comfortable. Um, I was fighting with the neck on that guitar at first because the one thing that I hate about Japanese strats is the thinness of the necks. The one thing that I love about Japanese strats are the frets and the rolled edges. And I roll the edges on this guitar, and I've been working on the frets, um, and trying to get myself to getting comfortable with it. Like, but I would say that I would change the neck on this guitar if I found a Japanese neck in good condition, like a Tokai or something like that. I would do it in a minute because I like Japanese necks. But it'd have to be a thick Japanese neck too. So see that's not a common thing. So there's always going to be something that you're going to have to make a small trade-off on. But that's a small one for me. I like I said, I can make the adjustment. And for modern, for note accuracy and for modern playability, quite frankly, these frets are more appropriate as opposed to frets on a 40 or 50-year-old guitar that probably worn down. And then eventually you'd have to have it refretted anyway. And that again, you gotta you gotta make those kind of calls on that one instrument, but it's that one instrument. Everything else about the sound, the way it sounds, it's just so sweet. The way it feels, when you're playing it, great. So that kind of stuff. Even someone like Slash says he only needs one or two good ones, but his collection is too far gone at this point. Yeah, that man has like 60, 70 guitars. You know, he's got quite a few. I mean, to the point where he gives Steve Perry one. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but it's the truth of it. I bet you if that Steve Perry Gibson was Strat's one and only Slash's one and only guitar, he wouldn't have given that away. Or if he valued it as a player the way that Steve Perry did. Again, one man's ceiling is another man's floor. Just because it's an expensive thing doesn't mean that it's your thing. You know, there's that. Slash just wanted it just so he could say he had Steve Perry's guitar. you know, he wasn't taking it out and playing it. When you have stuff you don't play, you have problem. You have problems. Your problems have gone too far. You've probably gone too far. Yeah. Mike, have you ever played a guitar with scoop frets? Thoughts? Yeah, I hate them. I hate them. I never like scoop frets is nothing new. I've been experiencing scoop fret guitars. John McKnight, my guy back in Windsor Hills when I was a kid. Go to his house and he had all the gear. He had a scoop guitar, and I played it a little bit, and I was like, you know what? Boy, I was 14 at the time, 15. So yeah, my thoughts on that have not changed in the last 44 years. Joe Perry. Joe Perry, sorry. Did I say something else? Steve Perry? Sorry. Steve Perry, that's Journey. Joe Perry. Thank you, Maddie. You know, old Joe Perry only have four fingers on his fretting hand. Did Joe Perry only have four fingers on his fretting hand? I don't know. I never heard that. I'm still getting past the Keith Richards having his hand surgically, made into this position. So that I mean, he's a pirate for real. Arr. I'll get you, matey. Dude, I just wanted to shake your hand. Can't shake that. That's crazy, man. That's craziness. You're laying in your coffin like this. Because the mortician can't do nothing with your hands. That is insane. That's insane. How are you gonna play Yingzi speed metal without this? Yeah, yeah. Oh, talk about guys who need to stop. That's another one I add to that list. I think Bernie did a Joe Perry Les Paul signature model Super Flame type. They did indeed. That is correct. My hand is also surgically set perfect for clutching guitar home wall break at 13. Really, Red? I didn't know that. I had no idea. I I find that interesting. But in his case, but it's a completely different thing in his case. He didn't break his arm at 13. Then I could say, okay, he broke his arm at 13. They had to do that, and that's how he does it. Okay, groovy. No, he had it done so that he could continue to go on, which leads to the question: why are you continuing to lead on where you're going to surgically alter your hand like that on purpose? That's a different thing, Red. Completely different thing from you. That's what I question. Les Paul arm was fused in a spot so he could continue to play. Yeah, I am sorry, guys. I just don't understand that. I mean, there's a point where I think you should, those guys to have themselves surgically altered to keep going. That's insane. Yeah, I never opted for breaking it, and definitely not for the sub. Yeah, you know that's a completely different mindset that I can't understand. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm old fashioned. But I was telling you, this is my picking thing because I don't use a pick anymore. I've gotten down to the point where, you know, I really enjoy playing, without a pick. And that arthritis that I got the other day was a reminder that again, there's going to be a finite time for me to play. And fortunately, I play piano, so I can get back to that. But in any case, I wouldn't do any kind of surgery, elective surgery, certainly, in order to keep playing. I wouldn't do that. Thanks, Red. You're doing well to play it all. I second that, Maddie. Yeah, I just don't get it. So anyway, I kind of got off the subject there, as I tend to do. Tonight I just really wanted to ask everybody in the chat about, what would be the one guitar that, is the one that's your musical home, the one that you tonally gravitate towards. And not necessarily the most valuable one, although it could have sentimental value, has been pointed out here tonight. Not the rarest one. The one that actually feels like your guitar. Because when you look at the history of music, a lot of great sounds came from players who spent years, sometimes decades, developing a relationship, a unique relationship with one single instrument. Sometimes it's the guitar you already have, and maybe sometimes it'll be a guitar coming up in the future. I guess, which is why you have a collection in the first place, because you're going through them, finding that one. But it will be the guitar that you'll, even if you find it the day before you die, that will be the guitar you'll play for the rest of your life. And honestly, that's good enough. That's good enough. Mike Washington says, my wife has essential tremors and it's getting more difficult for her to play now. Yeah, you know, I realize that. And boy, let me tell you something. I know some of you guys know this, but being fresh to this, that arthritis pain that I felt right in here, I was holding my hand like this for most of the day. Just walking around, literally with my hand, just holding it like this. I put it on the table because it was a constant throbbing, hurting, pain. And I realized that's just a signal of things to come. There's no getting rid of that. And was Keith Richards aware that you could get lighter strings? Apparently not. He says, "Damn it, I'm going to play these 13s to the end." But there's a finite point, and I realize that, and I'm okay with that. But if it's a guitar that I'm intimate with, I feel my chances of playing it longer will be a little because I'll know it very well. So I'll know, okay, I can't play or pick as heavy as I used to, but if I turn this up and I do this and make this adjustment, and then I can get there enough to be happy. So again, that starts with an intimacy with one particular instrument as well, which is a plus side. So there's more things on the plus side, I think, for having that one instrument as opposed to the negatives. Again, my one negative was wanting to have two different electric guitars at all times if I'm when I'm doing recording. But again, now with modern technology and this guitar, the way I have it set up, I can pull off a couple of different sounds out of it that you wouldn't know it was the same guitar. Arthritis is like lockjaw. It's freaking awful. Well, thank God I've never had lockjaw, Red, but the arthritis I had, and then the bitch of the bunch about the arthritis, and then it moved up here to right here, or the right where the bone is, right where the muscle in the bone. It moved from my hand, and moved up. I got that traveling kind of, on the road again, arthritis, trigger arthritis, because it moved. Then it moved up. Then the next day or so, it moved up to my shoulder, and then it went away. But that pain in my shoulder, I didn't want to be sitting there with a 8 or 9 pound guitar in my lap either. So like I said, you realize those things, and I'm happy I have a guitar that I have an intimacy with, and works for me. Mike's double fat strat video. Yeah, guys, if you haven't checked it out, please go down to the link that Scott so kindly, as usual, thank you, sir, put up, and take a look at that video. Good information there, and it's doing very well, actually, like I said. And I'd love to hear from you down in the comments. You feel that train coming around the bend? Yeah, you know, it's like I said, let the good times roll. Because when it's done, it's done. You know. So, but again, maybe one of these days, I have my theories as to why guys like Keith Richards would do something like that, and the kind of deals that those guys are in. uh, yeah. Any case, um, I just wouldn't want to be in my late 70s, 80s out on the road doing that kind of thing, man. I thought the whole thing was I'm gonna retire, get myself a farm, you know, out in the lake country, and raise sheep and chickens and stuff like that, and cruise my way into my sunset days. Not get my hands surgically altered so that I can go hit the road for 50 tour dates. That does not sound appealing to me. And I don't care how much money you put in front of me. You put the money or the farm in front of me, I'm going to take the farm, 10 times out of 10. Just me. Maybe just me. I don't know. All right, guys. So that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in to this live stream. The Sunday at Mike's. Sunday. I almost said Wednesday night home. Getting ahead of myself there. Thank you for showing up for the Sunday. Thank you guys always, the crew here, always showing up in the comment section, always supporting this channel, always being there for me and making me feel better, guys. I was sick actually after the live stream on Wednesday night. That night I came down with, I ate some fruit that was contaminated. I thought I washed it, but for 3 days I was in pure misery. It was terrible. And to be able to sit here again and look somewhat, I mean, I did not look like this 2 days ago, trust me. I was like, I looked like Kelly Osbourne on that Ozempic. Same complexion as well. But I'm feeling better. But thanks, guys, for showing up. I will see you guys this Wednesday. Until then, check out my video. Comment down in the section this one. Hit the like button, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.